This Week with Bob Mueller on News 2.
This week,
You're doing the really hard stuff. You're keeping it all together.
First Lady Jill Biden visits Fort Campbell and speaks with families of the 101st Airborne who are currently deployed in Poland.
This is a criminal information.
A former Tennessee GOP state party chair and current state representative resigns after being indicted on federal charges. More in our This Week cover story.
Hillsdale is not currently operating here.
Governor Lee defends inviting Free Will Baptist-founded Hillsdale College to operate charter schools in Tennessee despite opposition to its faith-based curriculum.
Wow, 2 years.
Nashville Mayor John Cooper looks back at the past 2 years, COVID, bombing, political unrest, and ahead in a speech before the Nashville Rotary Club. Hello again, and welcome to another edition of This Week. A powerful Chattanooga Republican State House member and former chair of the Tennessee Republican Party resigns after pleading guilty to federal charges. More in our This Week cover story. But first, the First Lady stops at Fort Campbell and the other political headlines of the week.
Through hugs, handshakes, and even hand-drawn pictures.
Isn't that cute?
First Lady Dr. Jill Biden greeted a room full of military families tonight at Fort Campbell.
It was amazing. I mean, honestly, she's so easy to just be close to.
Many of them are family members of 101st Airborne Division troops currently serving in Europe. Last month, hundreds of them were deployed just ahead of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
President and I are so proud of you, the members of the 101st Airborne Division, who are helping to keep our promise to NATO.
The 101st is serving on a combined task force providing security assistance to our European allies. Right now, there are no American boots on the ground in Ukraine, but there are troops stationed in Poland.
So we're holding Putin accountable for his war through diplomacy and crippling sanctions. And we're providing Ukraine with economic, humanitarian, and security assistance.
As a military mom herself, the First Lady says she came to Fort Campbell to show these families they are supported during this unprecedented time.
God bless you. God protect our troops and the families. So thanks a lot.
And after meeting with almost every family in here tonight, the First Lady departed back to Washington, D.C. around 7 o'clock tonight. Reporting from Fort Campbell, Chelsea Bimfor, News 2.
On Tennessee's Capitol Hill, Republicans are pursuing another abortion ban. Pro-choice advocates are concerned as the bill would allow anyone who helped a person get an abortion, including a doctor, to be sued. News 2's Gerald Harris has more on the concerns.
It's an attempt by Republicans to outlaw abortions without writing those exact words into law.
We're creating some pretty heinous unintended consequences here if we pass this legislation or this type of legislation. We're creating vigilantes out of friends and family.
They're following the lead of the controversial Texas law SB 8, which is on hold that bans abortions after 6 weeks and allows anyone to sue those who help someone seek an abortion. Tennessee's law will go further if this bill is passed, allowing people and doctors to be sued for $10,000.
Aiding and abetting, that includes people who are performing abortions. So like, again, thinking about clinics, thinking about all of these other folks who can be subjected to this lawsuit.
The restrictive abortion bill quickly appeared in an amendment packet just a few weeks before the end of committees.
I thought that Tennessee would have waited for the Supreme Court to rule on the Texas bill law before trying to make that happen here. But honestly, I knew it would happen at some point. I'm just surprised at the quickness that it's happening.
And if this bill is signed into law, opponents say it will be challenged.
We know that the Texas bill was suspended because it was unconstitutional. Same thing's going to happen here. I'm not sure there's much that this governor and this supermajority love more than spending taxpayer dollars on lawsuits, unwarranted lawsuits.
Gerald Harris, News 2.
Now to our This Week cover story. Chattanooga Republican State Representative and former state GOP party chair Robin Smith cut a plea deal on federal wire fraud charges, then resigned her seat in the legislature. The federal probe continues, involving a political consulting firm, Phoenix Solutions, resigned former House Speaker Representative Glenn Cassida and his former top aide, Cade Cothran, who also resigned. Prosecutors allege Smith, Cassida, and Cothran used the company to provide kickbacks. News 2's Gerald Harris has more takes a closer look at this story.
A year after the FBI raided the offices of several state Republicans, at least one lawmaker has been charged and 2 others are named as co-conspirators.
This is a criminal information. Criminal informations are generally when 2 parties, prosecutor and defendant, come together on an agreement of a charge and a sentence on the front end.
Republican Representative Robin Smith resigned after being charged with federal wire fraud. Former Speaker Glenn Cassidy and top aide Kay Cawthorn are identified in the federal filing as individuals 1 and 2. All 3 were subjects of an FBI investigation regarding Phoenix Solutions, a company prosecutors are alleging was set up and run by Cawthorn under the pseudonym Matthew Phoenix.
Obviously, the fact that this information has mentions other people involved in this criminal enterprise means more than likely that other people are under investigation.
The fake company was tasked with providing mailers and other outreach for lawmakers to send out legislative updates. Tennessee representatives are allocated $3,000 annually to fund postage and printing. Representatives were also allowed to use campaign funds to offset additional expenses beyond $3,000 under the mailer program, according to the federal filing. Prosecutors say Smith knew and tried to conceal involvement with Phoenix Solutions and the fact that they were getting a kickback from the profits of state funds for the mailers.
The information does not include a real dollar amount of monies that was defrauded. It does indicate that the damage is good faith representation, for lack of a better term. So in other words, the government is alleging that what happened in this case basically costs taxpayers the good representation of this representative. So that's sort of a hard one to put a finger on as to where that's going to go in the sentencing guidelines.
In her resignation letter to Speaker Cameron Sexton, Smith says that serving was an honor, adding, "I have resigned with the deepest humility and out of respect for the role of public service."
Welcome back. Governor Bill Lee this week defended the state's invitation to faith-based Hillsdale College to establish charter schools in Tennessee, agreed to look at the proposed gas tax holiday, and says a helicopter tour of Dallas helped him better understand Tennessee's growth needs.
I'd like to ask you about the Hillsdale 1776 curriculum. Kevin Cruz, who's a Princeton historian, says he is offended as a historian and as a Tennessean. He calls it mind-blowingly stupid stuff. What is your reaction to that?
Yeah, the Hillsdale operates a charter management organization with schools in 27 states across the country, Democrat, Republican states. We have actually 22 charter management organizations here. Hillsdale is not currently operating here, but they're one who would like to, and they'll go through the same vetting processes as anyone, which will include curriculum. So they'll be subject to the same process as any other charter management organization.
But you have embraced them, you included them in your State of the State. Do you not have an obligation to make sure that what they're teaching is historically correct?
I think that's why there'll be a vetting process for them through the State Department of Education.
What is your obligation?
My obligation is to attract high-quality charter management organizations into the state so that our students and our parents have options for high-quality education. We have 22 operators. Hillsdale's one of them. I invite them to submit an application here, and we'll see how that turns out.
Why are you and your administration, Hillsdale College, been so secretive about some of the information you've received, trips you've gone on, cabinet members? Why such secrecy around Hillsdale College?
Yeah, we've been very open about the fact that we want charter school operators in this state from all over the country. Any high-quality charter school operator that wants to locate in the state, we want them to consider that. Charter schools are a very important part of our public school system. We have 22 operators. We have 116 charters that educate 44,000 kids. 91% of those kids are minority students that come from, many of them from difficult zip codes and neighborhoods in our state. We need to give them, and we should make certain that we give the parents who choose that public school option for their kids, that option. And I invite charter operators from across the state.
There's research that shows that charter schools don't perform better overall than many public schools. What's your response to that? I mean,
well, in Metro Nashville, charter schools have a 10-point higher graduation rate than their counterparts. So what we're seeing are some really great outcomes for some, especially for those minority communities that their parents choose that public school option for them. We're seeing good outcomes. So we want that to continue.
Nashville, the mayor announced they're going to be receiving significantly less, same funding as some of the smaller counties. Why?
They're actually receiving $40 million more in direct student funding than under the previous plan. Student declines in population account for declines in safety net funding, but they'll get more funding. We're certainly seeing fuel taxes rise over last year, as well as prices of everything. There's a number of reasons for that. I've spoken very publicly about our country's decision to stop drilling, to shut down pipelines, to move from energy independence, and that's the result of it in this country. We've seen that, both gas prices and inflation. We'll look at any opportunity in our state to improve the impact of that on Tennesseans. That was proposed yesterday. I haven't had any conversations about it. I didn't introduce it, and there's a reason why that we are not introducing bills ourselves. We're currently in a situation with the existing legislation in place that is being reviewed by the courts. It's a very important process. My sense is that we need to let that play out. I haven't looked at that bill in particular, nor the Texas bill. We have a very clear footprint on our strategy regarding those pieces of legislation, and have brought them forth ourselves, and that's what we're staying with right now. You know, it's a rapid growth area of the city, Dallas, which is an enormous rapid growth community. It's well thought out and well planned. There are interstate systems that are obviously being planned and being laid out in advance of significant growth. You can see the growth. If you look at it from the air, you can see the growth moving itself out away from the city. It really was informative about how we should look at, in a thoughtful, foreplanning way, the highway system in a state like ours. When we have significant growth coming, and we see the tower cranes in this city and the growth in this, and now with what's happening in West Tennessee as a result of some of the latest investments by the private sector, it was important for me to see what should we be thinking about, and talk to some of the leaders there who have already gone down that path. How did they fund that? How did they plan it? What is the authority around it? And just learn from other people's previous experience. So.
Welcome back. We heard from Nashville Mayor John Cooper this week about the city getting past COVID, fewer state education dollars coming to Metro, and more.
Well, 2 years. Now, this is the second anniversary of this city facing a series of unprecedented challenges. We know the list. Tornado, derecho, financial emergency, civil unrest, bombing, of course, COVID. And it was 2 years ago today that Nashville experienced its first COVID case. Now, in these challenges and in others, we have done well as a city. Nashville's return to pre-COVID form is no small feat. This metro economy was disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, it reports. But by many measures, we have come back and already surpassed our pre-pandemic levels. Now, the report says that Nashville's pragmatic approach to managing the pandemic prevented the kind of economic damage that you would have expected and seen elsewhere. The Music City economy, Wells Fargo reports, now turns it up to 11. Now, the pragmatic management of COVID also saved lives. Statistically, as Vanderbilt predicted and experience confirmed, we saved 1,000 lives here. Lives that didn't have to be lost elsewhere, but we saved here. And helped by Dr. Jahangir and Dr. Hildreth and Dr. Schaffner at Vanderbilt and others, Nashville's response was a successful national model during the biggest health challenge that all and any U.S. cities have really ever faced. Now, the second report that I want to highlight is the Urban Land Institute's annual evaluation of cities and their prospects. And in that, Nashville is at the top of the supernova category among all American cities. Now, most super regional cities are doing well, but Nashville, with its healthcare, universities, growing tech sector, hospitality, and music, has all the building blocks for the greatest 21st century success. Now, by the way, being a state capital would have been very important to us 50 years ago, and it is useful. But government employment is not driving Nashville's success. In fact, government employment as a sector is down. But now we're at a time where our city faces a choice. We can grow with investment and create a better quality of life and incomes for all our people to take advantage of this moment. Or we can simply just grow. And if we avoid the hard management and execution decisions that come with growth, we will have a less good quality of life. And that would be to waste the opportunity that generations of my and your forebears worked to create here. Now, when I took office, I was given a letter from the state controller saying that they felt they were going to have to maybe come in and take over our city finances. It had really no cash reserves, no balanced budget. The state wasn't going to let us borrow forward. We were selling tax receivables to third parties and still having to collect them at a loss. You may call it a discount. I would call it a loss. We were intending to balance the operating books by expecting to sell public property in the future. And we took action to structurally balance our budget. And then just a few months later, we navigated through a crisis response budget during the pandemic. What does crisis response budget and the pandemic mean? That means we were several $100 million short, and we had no savings account to help. And COVID was creating an uncertain future. Now the city boasts improved metrics for liquidity, operations, long-term obligations, and we are investing in our future with historic investments in education, parks, and transportation improvements. And we also have the third lowest tax rate in our history and the lowest of the big cities in Tennessee, including lower than Murfreesboro, which also has a higher sales tax. They too have schools to build and a police department to fund. So I campaigned to bring financial stewardship to city government, and I am proud of the commitments that we have kept. Our improved financial situation is allowing us to make the necessary investments that we need to make, like making Nashville's teachers the best paid in the state. And we're investing in our new school facilities around the county, including the new James Lawson High School in Bellevue. We also tackled the digital divide, with all Metro students now having a quality laptop, internet connectivity, and training. 10 years of progress in the digital divide was made during the pandemic. Now our finances are back on track, which means balanced budgets and reserves strong enough to weather the next crisis. Now, homicide rates in neighboring cities went up last year, but Nashville's went down. In fact, overall crime is down 10%. Not enough, but that is a significant number compared to other cities. Now, we're also making fewer arrests, but that's thanks in large part to our Partners in Care emergency co-response pilot. And that's where a police officer and a mental health clinician responds to an emergency calls together. And 96% of the 911 calls that the co-response team handles, has led to help for people in crisis and not jail time. There is so much good in Nashville. The challenges we've faced so far together have brought out the best in us, the best among us. As Nashville continues to grow, it will take a dedicated team of public servants, like many of those that I've highlighted today, collaborating with the private sector to make Nashville work for everyone in every neighborhood.
I want to thank you for spending part of your weekend with us. That will do it for another edition of This Week. We hope to see you back here next weekend for another edition of This Week, and you have a great week.